Well, good morning from Pennsylvania. Starting to see warmer temperatures, but it's still very gray out there, kind of wet. So once again, inside, we had a very successful test with 5 players, actually 6 at one point, playing some of the minor powers. Been going back through the game with Tim and looking at the balance, and we believe that we have an awesome opportunity for you that is going to be released by the middle of April. So what I wanted to do in this video is I want to talk about the alliance system. Most people don't realize that the World War I alliance system was not predetermined. I had the good fortune just last week to work with a high school class, and we actually used the game diplomacy to kind of drive home some of the same teaching points about the alliance system and how difficult it was, and how the national interest and the negotiation process really drive everything. And that was a lot of fun. Found a lot of resources online to support how to use the game diplomacy to teach a high school class. So with that said, when you really look at the events leading up to World War I, 80 years prior, you have all of the major nations in Europe signing a 1839 Treaty of London guaranteeing Belgium neutrality. And it's actually that event that would lead Britain to join the war in 1914. Great Britain's role was not predetermined. It was not there was no guarantee that Britain would be part of any European fight. So how did we get there? Well, in 1879, you had the dual alliance where Germany and Austria essentially signed a pact that they would come to each other's aid should Russia continue in their ambitions going west, driving into either Germany or Austria. And Italy would sign that same alliance, eventually creating what we would know as the Triple Powers. However, while they signed that in 1882, they wouldn't honor it in 1914 because their excuse was that the Russians did not invade either nation first. They didn't start it, although they did mobilize first. But that discussion, who started World War I, is complex in and of itself. Suffice it to say, Germany and Austria were just building a defensive pact. Italy joined it, but then didn't honor it in 1914. In 1887, Germany and Russia signed a reassurance treaty, basically guaranteeing each other support should they be attacked by another party, unless Russia invades Austria or Germany invades France. Now, the short-sighted replacement of Otto von Bismarck in I believe it's 1880, would allow that to expire, and it would be interesting, should that treaty have continued to be renewed in future years, how would that have impacted World War I? In 1888, France, viewing this Central Powers monopoly here between three very strong countries, starts investing in Russian infrastructure and building a relationship, and eventually would sign a dual alliance that is meant to counter this triple alliance here in the center, and also guarantees if they are attacked, they would respond. Okay, so that's 1894. In 1904, when Russia and Japan are at war with each other, there's a lot of concern by the French government, who, remember, is very friendly with the Russians, and the British government, who is friendly with the Japanese. They didn't want to find themselves pulled into a war because their alliance system with those other two powers are in a conflict. So they settle over 1,000 years worth of grievances by signing the Entente Cordiale, which actually settles things outside of Europe. And that's all of the territories in Africa, specifically dealing with Morocco and and the other colonies down in Africa. So France and Great Britain really settle a long-running animosity through that one treaty. And then in 1907, what you find is a triple alliance is built, but it's built between Great Britain, Russia, and France. However, its focus is to settle the difference between Great Britain and Russia over interest in Italy. And it does not guarantee Great Britain's entry into a war with the Central Powers. What, again, brings Great Britain into war is the 1839 Treaty of London, when the neutrality of Belgium is violated. Something that we don't actually adequately represent in Global 14, and maybe we'll be able to correct that when we release the next version of the rules. It's something I've thought about quite a bit since we released the game, but that's okay. So back to global empires, which starts out with these 5 major powers: Great Britain, France, Germany, Russia, and the United States, not in any permanent alliance system at all. Now, I can't hypothesize all the possible machinations. I mean, I just walked you through 7 major treaty events that took place between 1839 and 1907. So what else could have occurred? Well, this is where it truly becomes a sandbox, and it's up to you, the players. Now, what I would tell you, and is what's represented here in this game, is Great Britain and Russia are peers. I'm sorry, Great Britain and Germany. I don't know why I said Russia. Great Britain and Germany, they are true peers in this game. They start out with the same MPPs. They start out with roughly the same value of units and facilities on the board. Followed closely behind by Russia and France, and then behind them, the United States. But the United States has the great luxury of distance and oceans between them and these major powers. So, if you are playing a 5-person game and you're France, who has enemies, potential enemies on multiple sides, Italy is most likely, not guaranteed, but most likely going to align with the Russians. The Germans are going to develop their friendships with the Ottomans, and France with the Austrians. The Japanese and the British have the most possible close ties. And so if you're someone like France or Russia, you should look to each other, because you really don't have competing demands. And what you could do is you could at least agree to support each other. What we're seeing with this 5-player game is that while France and Russia can get to wartime income usually a lot faster because it's a lot lower than their competitors, they did not attack first. But Germany, while they did attack, none of the nations have been able to truly breach each other's borders. Now, there has been some territory exchange here between the Russians and the Germans, and we're about midway through this game. But at the end of the day, it's going to be, how do you build not only permanent alliances by aligning a minor power such as Italy to Russia or Austria to France, but also how can you influence each other? So during the course of this game, Germany is at war with the United States. But interesting enough, what they did is they actually encouraged the United States, recognizing U.S. interest in the Pacific Islands. They specifically negotiated with the Americans that they would gladly allow them to attack and take these islands from them but requested that the U.S. maintain activity outside of Europe. That's a pretty good exchange. Now, you can't go to once you're at war in global empires, you can't undo that. You can't go back to a state of neutrality between you and another major power. But what you can do is you can agree where your sphere of influence is and not influence each other in those activities. And that's exactly what the Germans and U.S. have done. Additionally, while Germany is at war with France and Russia, they've carried on negotiations with the British, and although they haven't gone to war with each other, they've not influenced each other in against their neighbors. So the British are not necessarily supporting the French and the Russians in any way, and you can't. In this game, if you're not at war with someone, but they are at war, you can send them Lend-Lease. So if in this case, give you an example of that, the Ottomans are aligned to the Germans, but the Ottomans independently are at war with the British Empire, and the British Empire is on the move. So what has occurred is the Americans and other nations have been in support of Ottoman activity in order to tie up the British and keep them busy in a sphere so that they don't have opportunities elsewhere. That's very good for the Russians. So the Russians, with their alliance with the Italians, and the Italians have gone to war with the British, but the Russians are not. And so what we see is the British very busy at war with the Italians and with the Ottomans and unable to influence events otherwise against the Russians and vice versa. And so in this game, as you look to your objectives, try and figure out not everybody has to be your friend or in a permanent alliance with you, but your skillful negotiation skills with those, even those that you might already be at war with, are going to be incredibly important, because what you can do is you can support each other in unofficial ways. I'm going to put it that way. So lots of opportunity in this game. I hope you're looking forward to it as much as I am, with probably a mid-April release. And we'll come out with more videos, specifically step-by-step on how to play the game. Look forward to seeing you again in the future. Have a great month of March.